Steve Harvey stopped mid-show. The studio froze. A mother's words, just 7 of them, cut through the laughter, the lights, the game, everything. In 40 years of television, Steve had never done what he was about to do. He lowered the microphone. He closed his eyes. And in that moment, Family Feud became something it had never been before. The game board still glowed. The cameras still rolled. But nobody was playing anymore. Because sometimes, in the middle of entertainment, life walks onto the stage and demands to be seen. And when it does, even the most seasoned host in television knows, you don't keep playing. You stop. You listen. And you let the moment be what it needs to be. This is that story. It was a Tuesday taping at the Family Feud studios in Atlanta. The kind of day that starts like any other. 2 families, bright lights, Steve Harvey in a burgundy suit sharp enough to cut glass, and an audience ready to laugh. The Johnson family versus the Martinez family. Standard setup. Standard energy. Nobody expected what was coming. The Johnsons had come from a small town in South Carolina. 5 of them, Linda, the mother, her 3 daughters, and her younger brother. They'd driven 12 hours to get here, practiced answers in the hotel room, and walked onto that stage with the kind of nervous excitement that every contestant brings to Family Feud. Linda Johnson was 47. A Sunday school teacher. A woman who'd raised 3 girls mostly on her own after her husband died of a heart attack 9 years earlier. She wore a floral dress, not fancy, just clean and respectful, and when Steve Harvey greeted her during the introductions, she smiled the way people do when they're trying to hold too much inside. "So Linda," Steve said with that trademark grin, "tell me about your family." "Well, Steve," she started, her voice steady, "we're just a close-knit group. We do everything together. Church on Sundays, family dinners every Wednesday, and we always—" She paused, just for a second. "We always support each other no matter what." Steve nodded, moved on to the next family member. Standard intro. Nothing unusual. The game started. But what Steve didn't know, what nobody in that studio knew, was that Linda Johnson had buried her youngest daughter 3 months earlier. The first round went normally. Laughter. Buzzers. Steve doing his signature reaction faces to ridiculous answers. The audience eating it up. The Johnsons were doing well, actually, up by 60 points heading into the second round. Then came the question that changed everything. "We asked 100 people." Steve read from the card, his voice booming with that practiced showman energy. "What's something you'd want to tell a loved one before it's too late?" Standard question. Family Feud asks these kinds of things all the time. Heartwarming stuff mixed with the silly answers that make people laugh. Steve expected responses like, "I love you," or "I'm proud of you," or maybe something funny about apologizing for eating someone's leftovers. Linda was first to buzz in. The studio was still in game mode. Audience leaning forward. Cameras tight on her face. Steve holding the microphone toward her with that expectant smile. Everything normal. Everything routine. And then Linda spoke. That they mattered. 2 words. Said so quietly that the microphone barely caught them. Steve's smile flickered. Just for a second. Because there was something in the way she said it, not like an answer to a game show question, but like a truth pulled from somewhere deep and painful. That they mattered, Steve repeated, his voice softer now, instinctively matching her tone. Show me that they mattered. The board flipped. Number 4 answer. 17 points. The audience clapped. Game continued. Linda's family moved down the line for the next answer. But Steve was still watching Linda. And anyone who knows Steve Harvey, really knows him, knows that beneath all the jokes and the reactions and the perfectly timed comedy, there's a man who reads people. Who sees things. Who feels the weight in a room even when everyone else is laughing. Steve Harvey stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. It happened during the next family member's answer. Steve was setting up for one of his classic reactions, mouth half open, about to deliver a punchline, when he glanced back at Linda. She was standing at the podium, hands clasped together, staring at nothing. Tears streaming down her face. Not sobbing. Not making a sound. Just silent tears falling while her family kept playing around her. Steve lowered the microphone. "Hold on," he said quietly. Then louder. "Hold on. Stop the clock." The buzzer went silent. The audience murmur died. Even the crew, people who'd worked with Steve for years, went still. Because they'd never heard him say those words like that. Steve walked away from center stage. Not toward the audience. Not to make a joke. He walked directly to Linda Johnson, who was now covering her face with both hands. "Talk to me," Steve said, his voice barely above a whisper but picked up by his lapel mic so the whole studio heard. "What's going on?" Linda shook her head. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." "No," Steve interrupted, gently but firmly. "You don't apologize. Not here. Not now." "What happened?" The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Linda looked up at him. And then, in front of cameras and lights and hundreds of strangers, she told the truth. "My daughter," she said, voice breaking. "My youngest daughter, Sarah, she passed away 3 months ago. Cancer. She was 19. Linda's hands were shaking. "And in the hospital, toward the end, she asked me if I thought her life mattered. If she'd done enough. If people would remember her." The audience gasped. Several hands went to mouths. You could see it rippling through the crowd, that collective intake of breath when strangers suddenly become witnesses to something sacred. Steve Harvey didn't move. Didn't reach for a joke to lighten the moment. Didn't do any of the things he was trained to do as a host. He just stood there, one hand on Linda's shoulder, and let her speak. "I told her yes," Linda continued. "I told her she mattered more than anything in this world. But Steve," and here her voice broke completely, "I don't know if she believed me. I don't know if I said it enough. If I told her enough times. And when that question came up just now, what would you tell someone before it's too late? All I could think was..." She couldn't finish. Steve pulled Linda into a hug. Right there. On the Family Feud stage. While cameras rolled and an audience of 300 people sat in absolute silence. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. What happened next wasn't protocol. It wasn't in any producer's handbook. But it was exactly what needed to happen. Steve stepped back, still holding Linda's hand, and turned to face the audience. His eyes were red. His voice was thick. "How many of y'all got somebody you love?" he asked. Every hand in the studio went up. "How many of y'all ever lost somebody?" More hands. Slower this time. Heavier. "Then you know," Steve said. "You know what this sister's carrying. You know what it feels like to wonder if you said enough, did enough, were enough. And I'm gonna tell you what I wish somebody had told me when I lost my father." He turned back to Linda, speaking directly to her but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your daughter knew. She knew she mattered because you showed her every single day. Not just with words, with your life. With the way you raised her. With the way you loved her. And the fact that you're standing here, 3 months later, still asking that question? That's proof. That's the proof right there. Because people who don't matter? Nobody wonders about them after they're gone. Nobody carries them. Nobody feels their absence like a weight." Behind the scenes, Steve made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. He turned to the crew. "Kill the game clock. We're not finishing this round." Producers in the booth started talking into headsets. This wasn't how it worked. They had a schedule. Other families waiting. A show to tape. But Steve didn't care. "Bring me a chair," he said. Someone from the crew rushed out with the director's chair. Steve sat down. Right there in the middle of the stage. And then he gestured for Linda to sit too. "Tell me about Sarah," he said simply. And Linda did. For the next 8 minutes, 8 minutes of tape that would later be edited, condensed, shaped for television but never forgotten by anyone who was there, Linda Johnson told Steve Harvey about her daughter. About how Sarah loved music but couldn't carry a tune. About how she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. About how even when the cancer took her hair and her strength and finally her breath, she never stopped asking if other people were okay. The Martinez family, the opposing team, left their podium and came over. Just stood there with the Johnsons. Not competing anymore. Just present. The audience wasn't an audience anymore. They were a congregation. People holding hands with strangers. Tissues passing down rows. That particular kind of silence that happens when a group of people collectively realizes they're part of something bigger than entertainment. Steve listened to every word. Asked questions. Laughed when Linda shared a funny memory about Sarah trying to bake a birthday cake and setting off the smoke alarm. Wiped his eyes when Linda described her daughter's last words. "Tell everyone I was here, Mama. Tell them I was here." And then Steve Harvey did something he never done before in his entire career. He took off his jacket. That burgundy suit jacket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He stood up, took it off, and held it out to Linda. "This," he said, "is for Sarah. Because I want you to have something that proves this moment was real. That your daughter's story was told here. That she was here, in this room, through you. And every time you look at this jacket, I want you to remember, she mattered. She matters still." And you told the world. Linda took the jacket with shaking hands. Held it like it was made of something more than fabric. And then the entire studio stood up. Not because anyone told them to. Not because it was planned. They just stood. And they applauded. Not for entertainment. Not for the game. For Linda. For Sarah. For the raw, honest truth that had just been spoken into existence. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Steve turned to the cameras. Looked directly into the lens. And spoke to the millions of people who would eventually watch this. "If you're watching this at home," he said, his voice steady but weighted with something beyond performance. "And you got somebody you love, call them. Today. Right now. Don't wait till it's convenient. Don't wait till you got the right words. Just call. And tell them they matter." Because Linda's daughter? She asked that question because we live in a world where people can spend their whole lives not knowing. And that's not okay. That shouldn't be normal. He paused. The kind of pause that feels eternal on television. Sarah Johnson mattered. And I didn't know her. Never met her. But I know she mattered because I can see what her absence did to the people who loved her. That's the measure, y'all. Not what you accomplish. Not what you achieve. What you leave in the hearts of the people who knew you. That's the scoreboard that counts. The producers eventually got the show back on track. They finished taping. The Johnsons won their game, though nobody really cared about the score by that point. Linda donated her winnings to the Cancer Research Center where Sarah had been treated. But the story doesn't end there. After the show wrapped, after the cameras stopped rolling and the studio audience filed out, Steve Harvey sat with Linda Johnson for another 40 minutes. Backstage. No cameras. No microphones. Just two people talking about loss and grief and the weight of wondering if we've done enough for the people we love. Before Linda left, Steve gave her his personal phone number. Not a publicist's number. Not an assistant's number. His actual cell phone. "You call me," he said, "when it gets hard. When you need somebody to remember Sarah with you. When you need to hear again that she mattered. You call." Linda still has that number. She's used it twice. Both times, Steve answered. The episode aired 3 months later. The network initially wasn't sure. It was heavy, different from the usual Family Feud formula. But when it went out, something unprecedented happened. The show trended on social media not for a funny answer or a Steve Harvey reaction face, but for a moment of human connection so raw that people couldn't look away. Thousands of comments flooded in. People sharing their own stories of loss. Of wondering if they'd said enough. Of carrying the weight of absence. The episode was nominated for an Emmy. Not because it was entertaining, but because it was true. Steve Harvey has hosted Family Feud for over a decade. Thousands of episodes. Tens of thousands of contestants. But when people ask him about memorable moments, he always comes back to Lyndon Johnson. To that Tuesday when the game stopped and something more important took its place. "I've made people laugh for 40 years," Steve said in an interview months later. "That's my job. That's what I do. But that day I got to do something more. I got to help a mother make sure her daughter wasn't forgotten. And if that's the only thing people remember about my career, I'm good with that." The burgundy jacket hangs in Lyndon Johnson's living room. Not in a closet. On display. Next to a photo of Sarah. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't saying the perfect words. It's making sure the world knows someone was here. That they mattered. That their absence leaves a space nothing else can fill. Steve Harvey stopped a game show that day. But what he really did was give a mother permission to grieve publicly. To say her daughter's name out loud. To let the weight be witnessed. And in doing so, he reminded everyone watching, the people we love don't need perfect eulogies. They just need us to remember. To speak their names. To let the world know they were here. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten.